They laughed at us, me and my son, like we didn't belong there. I can still hear the sound of their laughter, sharp and cruel, mixing with the music from the deck. It wasn't the first time people like them had looked down on me, but it hit different this time because Mason was there. My 10-year-old boy didn't deserve to see his mom treated like that. It started when we walked into the dining hall that night. Everyone was dressed fancy, the lights glittering off wine glasses and jewelry. I held Mason's hand, trying to ignore the stares. We just wanted to have a nice dinner, enjoy the vacation Brett had insisted on. But the moment we reached the table, I knew we were walking into trouble. Brett's new wife, Camille, looked at me from head to toe and smirked. Her friends whispered something and giggled. Brett just sat there, pretending not to notice. I forced a smile and tried to focus on Mason, helping him with his napkin and asking what he wanted to eat. But they wouldn't stop. Camille leaned toward me, pretending to be polite, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "It's so sweet that you still try to dress up, Tara. That dress must have been such a good deal." The women at the table laughed. Mason looked up at me, confused. My face burned, but I swallowed the hurt and said nothing. Then Brett joined in. He started telling stories from our marriage, twisting them to make me look pathetic. He said I'd never been comfortable around real success. Camille laughed, touching his arm like she owned him. The others followed. I wanted to disappear, but Mason reached for my hand under the table. His little fingers squeezed mine, and I knew I couldn't show weakness in front of him. Still, when Brett made one final joke, something about me still hoping to win him back, the table burst into laughter. Mason's eyes filled with tears, and I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, and said quietly, "Let's go, baby." The laughter faded as we walked away, every step echoing against the polished floor. I didn't look back. We ended up outside on the deck, the wind cool against my face. Mason leaned his head against my arm. "Why are they so mean, Mom?" he asked softly. I didn't have an answer. I just wrapped my arm around him and said, "Sometimes people hurt others to feel big. But you never forget, kindness always wins in the end." In that moment, staring out at the dark sea, I promised myself something. They might have laughed at me tonight, but life has a way of evening things out. I didn't know how or when, but I knew that what they did would come back to them. Out there, under the stars, I made peace with the pain. Karma was listening. Tara Williams never planned on going on that cruise. She didn't have the time, the money, or the energy for something that fancy. Most days, she was either at the diner working double shifts or cleaning houses just to pay the bills. Life had been hard since Brett left. He moved on fast, marrying Camille, a woman almost 10 years younger, always dressed like she was walking a runway. When Brett called one evening, Tara thought it was about Mason's school. Instead, his voice was smooth, almost cheerful. "We're going on a family cruise next month," he said. "Camille found a great deal. Mason should come. It'll be fun for him." Tara was silent for a moment. The idea of her son on a cruise with Brett and Camille made her uneasy. Mason was only 10. He loved his dad, but Camille wasn't exactly the warmest person. Tara asked if it could just be Brett and Mason, but Brett hesitated. "It'd be weird without you there," he said. "You know, family vacation." Then came the catch. He offered to pay for her ticket to make things easier. It sounded kind, but Tara knew him too well. Brett never did anything out of generosity. Still, when Mason overheard the call and shouted, "Mom, please! I want to see the ocean," her heart softened. He had never been on a vacation before. She couldn't say no. That night, Tara lay awake staring at the ceiling. Part of her told her not to go. Brett had hurt her enough times to know better than to step back into his world. But Mason's excitement overrode every fear. He spent days watching videos of cruise ships, planning what he wanted to do: swim, eat ice cream, and watch dolphins from the deck. His joy made it impossible to refuse. When the day finally came, Tara packed her simple clothes, sundresses, sandals, a swimsuit she hadn't worn in years. She didn't need much. She wasn't going to impress anyone. She just wanted Mason to have a memory he'd cherish. At the port, she spotted Brett and Camille before they saw her. They looked like a magazine couple, matching luggage, designer sunglasses, and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Brett waved her over, and Camille gave a polite but tight smile. "So glad you could make it, Tara," Camille said sweetly, her voice laced with something sharp. Tara forced a small smile and nodded. "Mason wouldn't miss it," she replied. As they boarded, Tara tried to shake off the unease sitting in her chest. The ship was massive, shining under the sun, full of laughter and music. Mason ran to the railing, amazed by the view. Watching him smile made Tara's nerves fade for a moment. She told herself this was for him, just 1 week. 1 week to give her boy something special. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered that Brett had another reason for inviting her. She didn't know what it was yet, but she'd soon find out. From the moment Tara and Mason stepped onto the cruise ship, she could feel the shift. Brett and Camille moved through the crowd like they owned the place, greeting people with loud voices and wide smiles. They looked perfectly polished, dressed in matching white outfits, holding glasses of champagne before the ship even left the dock. Tara walked a few steps behind with Mason, carrying their modest luggage and trying to stay out of the way. At first, she tried to brush it off. Maybe Brett was just showing off for Camille's sake. But it didn't take long for the comments to start. As they explored the ship together, Camille turned to Tara and said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "You're so brave for wearing something so simple. I could never pull that off." It sounded like a compliment, but the tone said otherwise. Tara just nodded and walked ahead, not wanting Mason to catch on. Later, at lunch, Brett made a point of ordering expensive wine while Tara stuck with water. "You should try it," he said. "You only live once, right?" Camille laughed softly. "Oh, I don't think she can, Brett. Some people have to keep to a budget." The table went quiet for a second. Mason looked up, not understanding, but Tara quickly changed the subject. "Mason, how's your burger?" she asked, forcing a smile. That evening, things got worse. They all attended a small welcome party by the pool. Everyone seemed relaxed, dancing and laughing, but Camille never missed a chance to make a remark. "You know, Mason is such a sweet boy," she said to one of her friends. "I just wish he had more opportunities, you know? Kids in smaller homes don't always get much space to dream." The words were soft, but the meaning cut deep. Tara clenched her hands under the table. Brett didn't stop her. In fact, he seemed to enjoy it. Every now and then, he'd glance at Tara with that old smirk he used to wear when he knew he had the upper hand. It reminded her of every fight they'd ever had, every time he'd made her feel small. But this time, she wasn't going to let him see her break. When they returned to their cabin, Mason asked quietly, "Mom, why does Camille talk like that?" Tara smiled sadly and said, "Sometimes people say things to make themselves feel better. Don't worry about it, okay?" He nodded, trusting her, and fell asleep soon after. Tara sat by the window, watching the dark water stretch endlessly. The ship lights reflected on the waves like tiny sparks. She felt trapped between anger and sadness. She didn't want to ruin the trip for Mason, but she could already tell. This cruise wasn't just a vacation. It was a stage for Brett and Camille to remind her where they thought she belonged. What they didn't know was that life had a way of turning tables when people least expected it. The formal dinner night was supposed to be the highlight of the cruise. Everyone had been talking about it since day one. The music, the food, the captain's toast. Tara put on her best dress, a navy blue one she'd bought years ago for a cousin's wedding. It wasn't new or fancy, but it made her feel confident. Mason wore a small suit Brett had gotten him, and he looked so proud when he stood beside her. For a brief moment, Tara hoped the evening might go smoothly. But the moment they reached the dining hall, she saw Brett and Camille already seated at their table, surrounded by other couples they'd met during the cruise. They looked like a scene from a commercial, Brett in a crisp suit, Camille in a glittering gold gown. Tara smiled politely and took her seat next to Mason. She could feel eyes on her, quiet whispers passing between the guests. At first, the dinner seemed normal. The waiter poured drinks, people chatted, and Mason told a few jokes that made everyone smile. Tara relaxed a little. But then, when the waiter stepped away, Brett leaned back in his chair and said loudly, "You know, it's funny having my ex-wife here. She still calls me sometimes, asking for advice. I guess she hasn't really moved on." The table went silent for a second before a few people chuckled. Tara froze. "That's not true," she said softly, but Brett kept going, pretending to laugh it off. "I mean, it's okay, I get it. Change is hard. Not everyone can move on as easily as others." Camille leaned closer and smirked. "Oh, Brett, don't embarrass her. She only came because she couldn't afford her own vacation." That line broke something inside Tara. The whole table burst into laughter, some trying to hide it behind their napkins. Mason's face turned red. He stood up and said, "Stop talking about my mom like that." But Camille just smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, honey, it's okay. We're just joking. You'll understand when you're older." Her tone was dripping with fake sympathy. The laughter grew louder, and all Tara could hear was the sound of forks clinking and people whispering her name. A few phones came out, some guests recording or taking pictures of the scene. Tara's throat tightened. She stood up, holding Mason's trembling hand. "Let's go," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, but her heart was breaking. As they walked out, the room fell quiet for a moment, then someone laughed again. Tara didn't look back. She could feel tears burning her eyes, but she wouldn't let them fall until they were far from that table. Mason squeezed her hand, whispering, "It's okay, Mom." They reached the deck, where the night air was cool and soft. Tara finally let out a shaky breath. The stars above blurred as tears filled her eyes. She didn't know how people could be so cruel. All she wanted was peace for her son. But standing there, humiliated and heartbroken, she made a silent promise to herself. They would regret this, every single one of them. That night, the ship was quiet except for the sound of waves brushing against the sides. Tara sat on the upper deck, her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the dark water. Mason had fallen asleep beside her, his head resting on her lap. He looked peaceful, unaware of how broken his mother felt inside. The laughter and whispers from dinner still echoed in her mind. Every word Camille had said cut deeper than she wanted to admit. She tried to calm herself by focusing on the sea, the way the moonlight shimmered on the waves. For a moment, she thought about going back to their cabin and just forgetting the whole thing. But something inside her told her to stay. Maybe she needed air, or maybe she wasn't ready to face her reflection in the cabin mirror. That's when she heard voices nearby. She turned slightly and saw Brett and one of his friends standing a few feet away near the railing. They were both laughing, drinks in hand. She thought about walking away, but then Brett's voice caught her attention. "Man, I told you it's foolproof," he said, his tone cocky and careless. "We move the client money through the dummy company, mark it as investment returns, and funnel it back through the startup. It's clean, no trace." Tara froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew Brett always had a way of bending the truth in business, but this sounded serious, criminal even. His friend chuckled nervously. "You sure that's safe? That's a lot of money, Brett. What if someone looks into it?" Brett laughed loudly, shaking his head. "Come on, man. Who's gonna find out? It's all under Camille's name anyway. She doesn't even know half of what's on the paperwork. Besides, I've got friends in accounting who make the numbers look perfect. We'll be rich by the end of the year." Tara's heart started racing. She looked around to make sure no one else was nearby, then slowly reached into her purse for her phone. Her hands were shaking, but she opened the voice recorder and pressed record. Every instinct told her this was important, maybe even life-changing. Brett kept talking, bragging about how clever he was. "You know what's funny?" he said, laughing again. "Tara still thinks I'm just some small-time manager. If she knew how much money I've made off those idiots, she'd probably come crawling back." Tara's stomach turned. She wanted to scream, to walk right up and tell him what a terrible man he was. But she didn't move. She just sat there, silent, holding her phone steady as it captured every word. When Brett and his friend finally walked away, Tara stopped the recording and stared at the screen. Her heart was pounding, but for the first time that night, it wasn't from pain, it was from clarity. He had humiliated her, mocked her, and treated her like she was nothing. But now she had something powerful. Proof. As she looked down at her sleeping son, she whispered, "It's over, Brett. You just don't know it yet." The morning after, Tara kept her face calm. She smiled and chatted like nothing had happened. Inside, she felt steady. She knew anger wouldn't help Mason. What would help was proof and a plan. First, she made quiet calls. Her friend Lisa was an attorney who owed Tara a favor. Tara told her what she'd learned in general terms and asked for advice without sounding dramatic. Lisa listened, then said what Tara needed to hear. If there were signs that company money was being used for personal things, it could be serious. Lisa said to collect everything carefully and keep a clear record of where each piece came from. Tara moved slowly and deliberately. She began to gather evidence without making a scene. When Camille left a credit card receipt on the table after breakfast, Tara slipped a picture of it into her phone. When she saw a business card on the nightstand, she photographed that too. If Camille left a designer bag open with tags showing, Tara made a note of the store and price on her phone. She never touched anything, only photographed and wrote down details where they appeared. She also listened. At the pool, she joined light conversation and asked casual questions that made people reveal small things. A man mentioned he worked in accounting. He bragged about how easy it was to move numbers. Tara smiled and remembered his name. Small details like that mattered. They would form a pattern later. Tara used technology to lock the evidence in place. She emailed copies of receipts and photos to herself and to a secure account Lisa suggested. Each email had a short note about where she found the item and the time. That created a neat timeline. She backed everything up to a cloud folder and saved a copy on a USB drive she kept hidden in her luggage. She also protected the originals. Any paper she found that she could keep without stealing, flyers, brochures, or a misplaced invoice, she photographed and left exactly where it was. Then she wrote down the cabin number and time. Chain of custody mattered. Investigators would want to see that Tara hadn't tampered with anything. At night, when Mason slept, Tara typed careful notes. She described conversations she'd overheard, who said them, and where. She kept the notes short and factual, no drama, just what was said and when. Lisa told her that simple, clear records were the most useful to prosecutors. Tara avoided confrontation. She didn't scold Brett or accuse Camille in public. She stayed polite, which made the couple drop their guard. People showed off when they think no one is watching. Tara let them talk. She kept Mason's routine unchanged, play bedtime stories, so he wouldn't sense the storm brewing. Finally, Tara set a meeting with Lisa for when they were back on land. She had assembled a private folder full of photos, names, receipts, and notes. She had documented who was where and when. Most important, she had preserved everything in ways a lawyer or investigator would accept. Sitting on the balcony that night, Tara didn't feel triumph yet. She felt ready. She had built the case quietly and carefully. Now she would let the right people do their jobs. For Mason's sake, she would make sure the truth had a chance to catch up. 2 nights before the cruise was set to end, the evening felt calm and ordinary. The ship glowed with soft lights, music played from the deck, and guests were busy packing or enjoying their last dinners. Tara sat quietly with Mason at a small cafe near the pool, helping him finish a slice of chocolate cake. She looked normal on the outside, but inside she knew something big was coming. Her phone had buzzed earlier that day, a message from Lisa. It was short and clear. Authorities are coordinating with port security. Stay calm and act normal. Tara had read it twice, her pulse quickening. She'd done her part, and now it was in the hands of people who could actually bring justice. Around 8 p.m., as most of the passengers were settling in for the evening show, a voice suddenly echoed over the ship's intercom. "Attention passengers," the captain said, his tone calm but serious. "We have received communication from port authorities. Federal agents will be boarding the ship at our next stop for a scheduled inspection. Please cooperate fully if approached. Thank you for your understanding." The room went silent. Forks froze midair. People exchanged confused looks. Whispers filled the air within seconds. "Federal agents? What for?" someone murmured. Another joked nervously. "Maybe someone's smuggling diamonds." Brett and Camille were sitting a few tables away with a group of friends. At first they laughed. Camille waved her hand dismissively and said, "It's probably just routine. These ships get checked all the time." Brett nodded, though his smile didn't look as sure as before. "Yeah, just security stuff," he said, but his eyes darted toward Tara for a brief second, like he could feel something was off. Tara met his gaze. For the first time in years, she didn't look away. Her calm expression made him uneasy. She leaned closer, her voice low but clear. "Karma sails fast, doesn't it?" Brett's smirk faltered. He blinked, trying to laugh it off, but something in Tara's tone made the hair on the back of his neck rise. Camille frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, but Tara just smiled faintly and turned back to Mason, wiping a bit of icing from his cheek. Whispers spread through the ship all night. Some people claimed a passenger had been caught stealing. Others thought it was a customs issue. But Tara knew the truth. She'd watched the quiet communication between Lisa's contact and the authorities, the coded messages that confirmed the investigation was real. Back in their cabin, Tara tucked Mason into bed. He was tired, unaware of the storm about to hit. She stood by the window, looking out at the dark ocean stretching endlessly ahead. The water shimmered faintly under the moonlight, calm and endless, just like the patience it had taken her to reach this point. In the hallway outside, she heard Brett's voice. He was pacing, talking quickly to Camille. "It's nothing," he kept saying, but his tone cracked. Camille whispered something about checking their documents, her voice trembling. Tara closed her eyes and took a slow breath. Justice was closer now. For the first time since the cruise began, she felt completely at peace. The same ship that carried her humiliation was about to deliver their downfall. The next morning, the sun rose over calm blue water, painting the ship in gold. It should have been a peaceful morning, but the air was heavy with tension. People were already talking before breakfast was even served. Everyone had heard the announcement the night before, and the rumors had grown overnight. No one really knew what was about to happen, but they were about to find out. Tara woke up early. She quietly got dressed while Mason was still asleep. When she stepped onto the balcony, she saw the coastline coming into view. The port looked small but busy, with several official-looking boats waiting nearby. Her heart thumped softly in her chest. It was time. By the time Mason woke up, the ship had slowed. "Are we stopping already?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. Tara smiled gently. "Just for a little while, sweetheart. Stay close to me, okay?" Minutes later, a firm voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, passengers. Please remain calm. We are welcoming federal authorities on board for a brief inspection. Your cooperation is appreciated." Silence swept through the ship again. From the deck, Tara saw several men and women in Navy uniforms climbing aboard. They weren't cruise staff, they were federal agents. They moved quickly, speaking quietly into radios, their presence commanding and serious. Brett and Camille appeared on the main deck soon after. Camille was dressed in a silk robe, clearly caught off guard. Brett tried to act calm, pretending to scroll through his phone, but his hands were shaking. Tara stayed by the railing with Mason, her arms wrapped protectively around him. It didn't take long. Within minutes, 2 agents approached Brett. "Mr. Brett Langford?" one of them asked. Brett frowned, glancing around as if unsure whether to answer. "Yes. We need you to come with us," the agent said firmly. "We have a warrant for your arrest related to an ongoing financial investigation." Gasps filled the air. People gathered near the pool, whispering and pointing. Camille stepped forward, her voice rising. "There must be some mistake. We're on vacation." The agents ignored her. They asked Brett to place his hands behind his back. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was sharp and final. Camille burst into tears, grabbing one agent's arm. "Please. I didn't know anything about this," she cried. Her mascara streaked down her face as Brett snapped. "Just stay quiet, Camille." The same people who had laughed at Tara during dinner were now staring in shock. A few whispered to each other, remembering how Brett and Camille had bragged about their wealth and success. No one laughed this time. Tara didn't move. She just stood there quietly, her hand resting on Mason's shoulder. "Mom," he whispered, "what's happening?" "Just something that needed to happen," she said softly. Brett's eyes met hers as the agents led him past. His confident smile was gone, replaced by fear and disbelief. Tara didn't say a word. She didn't need to. He knew. As the agents escorted Brett off the ship, the morning sun glared off the water. Camille followed behind, still shouting that she was innocent. Passengers parted to make way for them, murmuring among themselves. When it was over, Tara turned to Mason and said, "Let's get breakfast, honey." Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. They walked away while the crowd buzzed behind them. For the first time in a long while, Tara didn't feel small. She didn't feel powerless. Standing by the railing one last time, she watched the smaller boats pull away from the cruise ship. The waves shimmered under the sunlight, and Tara felt something she hadn't felt in years, justice. When the cruise ended, Tara and Mason quietly left the ship. Reporters were already waiting at the dock, snapping pictures and shouting questions as Brett and Camille were escorted away by federal officers. Tara kept her head down, holding Mason's hand tightly. The chaos behind her felt distant, like the closing of a chapter she had waited years to end. Over the next few weeks, news of the case spread everywhere. Brett's arrest became a headline story. Every major network covered it. Wealthy tech CEO charged with fraud and embezzlement. Photos of him being led off the cruise ship in handcuffs were all over social media. People who once admired him now called him a liar and a thief. Camille tried to play innocent from the start. She claimed she had no idea what Brett was doing, that she was just his unlucky partner. But investigators found proof that her name was on multiple transactions. Company funds used for luxury shopping, expensive trips, and jewelry. The same champagne she bragged about on the cruise was bought using stolen money. Tara's recordings became the key evidence. She had captured every word of Brett's bragging, names, amounts, and methods. When she handed the audio file to the investigators, they were stunned by how clear it was. Her lawyer friend helped her submit everything legally, ensuring she would be protected as a cooperating witness. The court process took months. Brett's confident smile disappeared completely when he saw how strong the case was. The prosecutors showed his messages, emails, and Tara's recording in court. Each time he tried to deny something, another piece of proof surfaced. Camille's attempts to distance herself failed too. Her signature appeared on bank documents she had once posted proudly on social media, showing off her business empire. When the trial ended, Brett was sentenced to several years in prison for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Camille received a lighter sentence, but still had to face the consequences. All of their assets were seized: cars, houses, jewelry, everything. The company Brett had built collapsed completely. Tara didn't celebrate loudly. She didn't gloat or seek revenge online. She simply took a deep breath and focused on rebuilding her life. The authorities later informed her that, as part of the restitution process, she would receive a portion of the recovered assets. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to start fresh. With that money, Tara bought a small but beautiful home near the ocean, far away from all the noise of the city and the memories of her past. It wasn't grand, but it was peaceful. Mason finally had his own room, painted in bright blue, with a window that faced the sunrise. One evening, Tara stood outside, watching Mason ride his bike in the driveway. The wind smelled of salt and freedom. She thought about everything. How far she had come from being humiliated on that cruise to standing strong on her own. Justice had come, not with anger, but with truth. Tara didn't need revenge anymore. She had peace, stability, and her son's smile. That was enough. Months passed, and life finally began to feel calm again for Tara and Mason. The weight of everything that had happened slowly lifted. There were no more phone calls from lawyers, no more reporters waiting outside her door, no more painful reminders of the people who had tried to break her spirit. It was just her and her son, living quietly, healing little by little. One afternoon, Mason came home from school with a travel brochure in his hand. "Mom," he said excitedly, "look, it's a cruise to the Bahamas. Can we go?" Just us this time. At first, Tara hesitated. The word cruise still brought back painful memories. But then she looked at Mason's hopeful eyes, full of innocence and joy, and she knew it was time to replace those memories with better ones. So she booked it. No first-class cabins, no luxury suite, just a simple room with an ocean view. When they boarded the ship months later, the air felt different. The same scent of salt water surrounded her, but this time it didn't sting. There were no cold stares, no fake smiles, no one whispering behind her back. Just families laughing, kids playing, and music in the background. For the first time in a long while, Tara felt like she belonged. She and Mason spent their days exploring every corner of the ship. They joined dance nights, watched movies under the stars, and ate ice cream on the deck. Every laugh from Mason reminded Tara of how far they had come, from humiliation to happiness, from pain to peace. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky gold and pink, Tara stood at the railing with Mason beside her. The waves were calm, moving gently against the ship. Mason leaned on her shoulder and said, "Mom, this cruise feels better." Tara smiled softly. "That's because this time it's ours," she said. She thought about everything that had happened, the insults, the laughter, the tears, and how karma had found its way back to those who deserved it. She didn't need to scream or fight. She had stayed quiet, gathered proof, and let the truth do the talking. Life had handled the rest. Looking out at the endless sea, Tara whispered to herself, "Some tides wash away pain, others bring justice." It wasn't anger that brought her peace. It was patience and faith that the right thing would happen in its own time. She had learned that revenge doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through the calm satisfaction of knowing that truth won, and that she and her son had risen above it all. As the ship sailed deeper into the glowing horizon, Mason laughed beside her, the sound echoing like music. Tara felt her heart lighten. The ocean that once carried her pain now carried her peace. And as the waves shimmered under the setting sun, she finally let go, grateful, strong, and free at last.